I raised my daughter alone after her mother died. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, and stitched her prom dress by hand. But on her wedding day, I stood outside the hall, soaked in rain, listening to her call another man Dad. That moment broke me, but it also remade me. Hey everyone, welcome back to Timelines. This story is for every parent who's ever given everything only to be forgotten when it mattered most. If you've ever loved too deeply or been taken for granted, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. This one's going to hit home. I used to think my life had one purpose: raising my daughter, Lily. After my wife, Margaret, passed away from breast cancer, I was left alone with a 10-year-old girl who had her mother's eyes and my stubborn heart. I drove city buses back then. Long, bone-tiring hours that left grease under my nails and exhaustion in my bones. But every time I came home and saw Lily asleep on the couch, homework scattered, I knew it was worth it. I'd work double shifts just to afford her dance classes. When she wanted a pink bicycle, I skipped lunch for 2 weeks. When she needed braces, I took a second job cleaning the depot after hours. And when her prom came around and money was tight, I learned how to sew, stitched every inch of that satin dress myself. I still remember her face when she twirled in front of the mirror. "Dad, you're the best." That line kept me alive for years. After high school, Lily got into a big university out of state. I cried like a fool at the airport when she left. She hugged me and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll call you every day." She didn't. Calls turned into texts. Texts turned into emojis. And soon even those stopped. But I told myself that's just how kids grow. You raise them so they can leave. That's what good parents do, right? When she graduated, I drove 6 hours to see her walk across the stage. She smiled and waved, not at me, but at a group of friends in the stands. I sat there with a cheap camera in my hand, waiting for her to look my way. She never did. Still, when she called months later saying, "Dad, I met someone," I was overjoyed. His name was Jason, software engineer, tall, charming, polite. She told me they were engaged after only a year. I pretended not to feel uneasy. I told myself I'd finally get to walk her down the aisle, the moment every father dreams of. That dream turned into something else entirely. The wedding was set for late spring. She sent me an invitation, not personally, but through the mail. It was elegant, expensive, with a gold-embossed Thomas Guest at the bottom. No mention of father of the bride. Still, I ironed my best suit, bought a tie that matched her wedding colors, and even polished my old shoes. I was nervous, proud, and maybe a little lonely. That morning, I got in my truck, started the engine, and heard a loud pop, flat tire. No big deal, I thought. I'd changed hundreds of them. But as I crouched in the driveway, rain started pouring. The sky opened like it had been holding back tears of its own. By the time I got the spare on, I was soaked through and an hour late. I called Lily, no answer. Texted her, no reply. I told myself she was just busy getting ready. The highway was chaos. Rain, thunder, accidents. By the time I reached the venue, 2 hours had passed. The parking lot was full, lights bright through the storm. I ran through puddles, clutching the small gift I'd bought her. A pearl necklace that once belonged to her mother. But before I reached the door, I heard something that stopped me cold. Inside, through the laughter and music, came Lily's voice. Clear as a bell, full of joy. "Thank you, Dad, for always being there for me." The man walking her down the aisle wasn't me. From the crack in the door, I saw him. tall, confident, smiling as he led my little girl toward her future. The crowd stood teary-eyed. Her husband-to-be looked proud. And me? I stood in the rain, watching years of sacrifice dissolve into nothing. My hand tightened around the necklace. I could have stormed in, shouted, demanded an explanation, but something inside me broke instead. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was the quiet death of purpose. I'd built my world around being her father, and now that world had no place in hers. So I turned around, and I walked away. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The rain hadn't stopped. Neither had I. I replayed that scene 100 times. Her voice, that word, Dad. I thought about all the nights I spent stitching that dress, all the birthdays I celebrated alone, all the sacrifices I made believing love would be enough. For 3 days, I didn't eat. For a week, I didn't sleep. I'd stare at her old room, empty except for the prom dress hanging behind the door, untouched. I wasn't angry at Lily. Not really. I was angry at myself for never building a life outside of her. I realized I had poured everything I was into being needed, and now there was nothing left of me. One evening, a letter came. Wedding photos. I opened the envelope and saw her smiling in that white gown, beside that man, hand in hand with the stranger she called Dad. I put the pictures away and promised myself something. If the world didn't need me anymore, I'd find a reason to need myself. The days after that promise were heavy. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to start over at 70. I'd spent decades running on routine, bus routes, meal times, Lily's needs. Now every morning stretched like an empty road with no passengers waiting. I tried watching TV, tried gardening. Nothing filled the silence. The house creaked at night, mocking me with its stillness. I'd sit in my recliner, holding the necklace I never gave her, whispering, "You would have loved this, Margaret." But something started shifting, slowly, quietly. It began when my neighbor's grandson left his bike on the sidewalk. The chain had snapped. The boy looked frustrated, kicking at the dirt. I walked over and said, "You mind if I take a look?" 10 minutes later, it was fixed. His eyes lit up like I'd just performed magic. "Thanks, mister," he shouted, riding off. For the first time in months, I smiled. That small moment planted something. A seed I didn't know was still alive. I started tinkering again, fixing old bicycles people threw away, repainting them, giving them to kids who needed one. Word spread. Soon, neighborhood parents were dropping off bikes, lawnmowers, even toasters. It wasn't about money. It was about purpose. One day, a woman from the community center stopped by. "We're starting a senior art group," she said. "You should come. We paint, talk, drink terrible coffee." I almost said no, but something in her tone, that easy warmth, reminded me of Margaret. So I went. The first class felt awkward. I hadn't held a paintbrush since high school, but the room buzzed with laughter, the smell of turpentine and cheap cookies filling the air. I painted a sunset that looked more like spilled ketchup, but everyone clapped anyway. That night, I felt lighter. Week after week, I showed up. I painted skies, faces, memories. One afternoon, I painted Lily as a child, missing tooth, hair in pigtails, beaming after learning to ride her bike. The woman next to me said softly, "She must be special." "She was my whole world," I replied. "Was?" she asked gently. I didn't answer. Then, one day, Lily called. "Dad!" Her voice trembled. "Can we talk?" My heart stuttered. I wanted to yell, to forgive, to cry, all at once. But instead I said, Of course, Lily. She told me things hadn't been easy, that her husband's job kept him away, that she'd been reflecting on the wedding, that she didn't mean to hurt me. I listened. I wanted to believe her, but there was still a part of me that couldn't forget the sound of her calling someone else Dad. We agreed she'd visit in a few months, and that's when I decided I wasn't going to be the same man she left behind. When Lily said she wanted to visit, I circled the date on the calendar. Not out of excitement, out of curiosity. I wanted to see what kind of woman she'd become. Would she walk in expecting the same old dad, quiet, forgiving, waiting on the porch with tea and nostalgia? Not this time. I didn't want revenge in the petty sense. I didn't want to yell or shame her. What I wanted was something quieter and sharper. I wanted her to see the life she'd thrown away, now thriving without her in it. I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be unnecessary. So I got to work. The house had grown stale over the years, curtains yellowed, paint peeling, air heavy with memories. I started clearing it out, lot out of sadness, but rebirth. I repainted the walls a soft ivory. I replaced the old couch with one I built myself, maple wood, varnished smooth with blue cushions that matched the sea Lily used to love. I hung up my paintings, not of her, but of the world as I saw it now. Open skies, rivers, laughter. Then came the garage. Once cluttered with tools and regrets, it was now a workshop. Rows of polished bicycles leaned neatly along the wall, each tagged with a name. Tommy's first ride, Anna's birthday wish, Mia's freedom wheels. Each bike told a story of someone I'd helped, someone who saw me, even if Lily didn't. The community center had become my second home. I wasn't the old bus driver anymore. I was Thomas, the man who taught kids to fix things, the one who painted memories into colors. They invited me to display my work at the annual spring exhibit, the same week Lily planned to visit. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized it was poetic. The exhibit would be my canvas, my story told without words. 3 weeks before Lily's visit, I started working on one last painting. It was the hardest one yet. A father standing in the rain outside a wedding hall, holding a small gift. His face was half in shadow, half in light. Behind him, through blurred glass, a bride walked down the aisle with another man. I called it The Man in the Rain. Each stroke was therapy. Each layer peeled away bitterness and replaced it with calm. By the time it was done, I didn't hate Lily anymore. I pitied her for losing something she didn't even understand. The day before she arrived, I invited my art group and a few neighborhood families for a small dinner. The house buzzed with warmth and laughter. Kids ran through the yard. Music played softly. I caught myself laughing, a sound that had been missing from this place for years. And that's when I saw headlights pulling up. Lily. She stepped out of her car hesitantly, clutching a small gift bag. She looked different, older, maybe wiser. Her hair tied neatly, her eyes scanning the yard as if she couldn't recognize the life blooming where silence used to live. "Dad?" she said softly. I turned, wiping my hands on a towel. "Lily," I said, calm but firm. "You're just in time. Come in. We're having dinner." Her eyes widened. "We?" "Neighbors, friends, people who put up with my terrible jokes." I smiled. "Join us." She followed me inside, looking around in quiet astonishment. The photos on the wall weren't of her. They were of me with the kids whose bikes I'd fixed, the art group, the community. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "You've been busy." "I had to be," I said simply. Life doesn't wait around for anyone to remember you. Dinner was tense, at least for her. People laughed, passed plates, told stories about me, how I'd stayed up late fixing a bike for a kid's birthday, how my paintings sold at the community auction. I could see Lily's smile faltering with every compliment that didn't involve her. After dessert, when the last guest left, she finally asked, "Dad, why didn't you tell me you were doing all this?" I looked at her, really looked. She still had that same nervous habit of twisting her ring when she was uncomfortable. "Because you didn't ask, sweetheart," I said. "You had your own world. I decided to build mine." Her eyes glistened. "I didn't mean to hurt you. That day at the wedding." I stopped her gently. "You don't have to explain. I heard you call another man Dad. You had your reasons." She winced. "He's Jason's stepfather. He offered to walk me down the aisle because you weren't there yet." I nodded slowly. "I see." The silence stretched. She whispered, "I didn't know you arrived. I thought you didn't come." I let that sink in. I could have told her the truth about the rain, the flat tire, the hours I spent trying to get there. But instead, I said, "It doesn't matter now. Maybe it was meant to happen that way." Her voice cracked. "Dad, please. I missed you." I looked around at the warm, full house, the laughter still echoing faintly in the air. Then back at her. "Lily, I missed you too," I said. "But I don't think you'll ever miss me the way I missed you." She stayed overnight in the guest room. I could hear her crying softly through the wall. For a moment, guilt crept in. That old instinct to comfort her, to fix it. But I stopped myself. Some lessons have to hurt to heal. The next morning, I told her I had somewhere to be. The art exhibit. She offered to come along. At the gallery, people greeted me warmly. My paintings lined the walls, each with a small card. Artist, Thomas Hale. Lily walked beside me, reading the titles. Sunday Repairs. A Kid Learning to Fix a Bike. Quiet Mornings. An Empty Kitchen Filled with Sunlight. And finally, The Man in the Rain. She froze. Her hand covered her mouth. "Dad, that's..." "Yeah," I said quietly. "That's me." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You painted this?" "I had to," I said. "It's the moment I realized I'd lost myself trying to be someone else's everything." She turned toward me, trembling. "I don't deserve you." I smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But I deserve me." That was my revenge, not cruelty, not spite. It was showing her the life I'd built without her validation, showing her that I had become whole again, while she still searched for meaning and apologies. Lily spent the rest of the exhibit silently following me, tears staining her cheeks. When people came up to praise my work, she stood in the background, watching the father she had once overshadowed, now glowing in his own right. And when someone asked me, "Who's the woman in the painting behind the rain?" I said, "Just a memory, one that finally let go." After the art exhibit, something shifted, not just in Lily, but in me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't a father trying to be remembered, or a widower trying to fill silence. I was Thomas Hale, artist, neighbor, and friend. But I could see it in her eyes, that mixture of guilt and realization. She had finally seen what I had become and what she had taken for granted. As we walked out of the gallery, Lily was quiet. The air between us was heavy, but not hostile, just honest. She said softly, "Dad, when I called him Dad at the wedding, it didn't mean you weren't my father. I was panicking. The coordinator said we couldn't delay, and Jason's stepdad offered to step in. I thought I'd explain later, but when I saw you weren't there, her voice cracked. I thought you didn't care anymore. That maybe, after Mom, I was just a reminder of pain. I looked at her, this grown woman who once thought I could fix everything, now standing before me, broken by her own choices. I said, Lily, love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, even when it hurts. I spent years showing up for you. When you stopped needing me, I didn't know who I was anymore. That wasn't your fault, but it became my problem to solve. She wiped her tears. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already have, I said. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about no longer letting it control you. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass by the gallery windows, parents holding hands with their kids, friends laughing over coffee, life moving forward. Then I said, You know, Lily, you were my biggest painting, but I finally realized I can't spend my life waiting for one canvas to dry when there are 100 more waiting to be started. She smiled through tears. You always find poetic ways to make me feel small and loved at the same time. I chuckled. That's a father's specialty. That evening, she insisted on cooking dinner. She made spaghetti, Margaret's recipe, the one she used to beg for as a kid. As the sauce simmered, she said, Jason and we're not doing well. He's distant. I think he liked the version of me that was ambitious and polished, not the one that feels guilty and tired. I stirred the pot quietly. Then maybe it's time you ask yourself who you are when no one's expecting anything from you. She nodded. Like you did. Exactly. For the first time in years, dinner didn't feel forced. We laughed. We shared old stories. She told me she'd been reading my name in the local paper. Thomas Hale, the man who repairs hearts and bicycles. Apparently, someone had written an article about the art exhibit and my volunteer work. I had no idea. She said, I didn't even recognize the man in that story. You're happy. I am, I said simply. And you can be too. But you have to stop waiting for someone to give you permission. When she left 2 days later, she hugged me like she hadn't in years. It wasn't the quick, polite kind. It was the kind that says, I get it now. She whispered, I don't deserve another chance. I hugged her back, then earned one. As she drove away, I didn't feel the emptiness I used to. I felt peace, the kind that comes when you finally let go of who you were and accept who you've become. Weeks passed. Then one morning, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Lily. Inside was a photo, her holding a painting she'd done. The caption read, For the man who taught me that love isn't about being needed, it's about being known. Attached was a note. Dad, I joined a local art class. I thought maybe I could learn to see the world the way you do. Not through expectations, but through color. You were right. I had to lose you to understand what you gave me. Love, Lily. I sat at the kitchen table, tears falling silently. Then I looked around my little home, the paintings, the laughter, the memories, and smiled. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was redemption. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with flames or fury. Sometimes it's quiet. A mirror held up to the people who once made you feel invisible, forcing them to see the reflection of what they lost. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice, that giving everything was the ultimate proof of devotion. But what I learned is that real love has balance. It gives, yes, but it also protects itself. I didn't hurt Lily to get even. I let her face the silence she left behind, and filled that silence with something better. Now, every morning, I walk to the park with my coffee, greet the kids riding the bikes I repaired, and watch the sunrise. Sometimes, I still miss the past, the family dinners, the laughter, the girl who once called me Dad without hesitation. But then I remember. She's still out there, learning, growing, maybe finally painting her own life. And I'm right where I belong. In the end, my revenge was simple. I stopped waiting to be part of her story and became the hero of my own. If this story touched you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after being forgotten, hit like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you've learned to do just for you? Because sometimes the best revenge is peace.